general.
Yeah, let's just run it from the top. Talk to me about this new AI music being called a new genre like A-pop. That's so fascinating. This is something that all of them were talking about is like, how are we going to implement? Were artists going to use it? And in reality, like it's just the label's going to go and try to create these artists because they can make more revenue off of the streaming than, having a real person they have to share it with. But what's going on with this? What's happening?
It's being dubbed a whole new genre called Apop. It's funny, I'm in Japan right now, and K-pop is everywhere, which is Korean pop, and the music is being played everywhere. And what's fascinating to me is the artists a lot of times aren't even shown, they're like animated. So you see someone singing, and then the imagery is like 3D avatars and anime types. When I hear things like APOP, what difference does it make if it's a real person or an AI creating the music and singing it? If the representation, the visual representation of the person is not even real anyway. Bars, restaurants, and what's on the screen is anime and K-pop is being played. And I can see that across A-pop, artificial intelligence music, just being played in the same way, just AI depictions of whatever's being played. The other thing I think is really interesting is music streaming companies like Deezer publicly said they will not include AI generated music in any of their playlists, like the DJ'd ones, the ones that they're putting together, like new music releases and things like that. But it may be in a future world, there will be A-pop new releases like every Friday, like on Spotify, you always check what artist released. Maybe it'll be the same thing just in A-pop category. So they'll have their own like DJ playlists, their own new music releases. And like as I'm watching K-pop here in Japan, and no artist is actually being shown a lot of the time. Mostly it's some kind of virtual representation of them. What difference does it make if the music is not sung by a real person in the future anyway?
Totally. I feel like it's this inevitability that nobody wants to think about. We're going to end up with social media that's just like infinitely created by the social media giants to keep people on platform as much as possible. There's that old short story that talks about this, but it's like the box, I think is what it's called, where it just keeps you going. I feel like music, all entertainment in some way, there's going to be some sector of each of the industries that is just entirely AI generated, looks at the consumption rates, makes more based off of what's performing best, and it creates this loop. So it's going to be wild to see what happens. Where do you see this going, Toli? Do you think all the record labels will start releasing stuff within this, or or is it just kind of like smaller art collectives that are doing it currently? What's your thoughts on that?
I definitely think record labels will do this. Sometimes I see artists that I've followed for a while being pushed really, really hard. Like I'll give an example recently. Youngblood, who's an incredible artist, like he's recently clearly a huge PR push by record labels. They gave him a whole new vibe, a whole new thing, all in anticipation of his new album release. So I do think that there's definitely a marketing angle with record labels. And if they can do this with the real artist, how many people actually ever get to meet or see the person in real life? Very, very little. They can do the same thing with AI generated ones. So if they wanted to push like a certain demographic or certain type of music genre, and they don't have to like quote unquote fix up a real artist to do so or prepare them for like their big PR push, I don't think anything stops them from doing the same thing from an AI artist. The other part that comes to mind is like, where does that leave live music and live entertainment? I go try to see live artists like usually every couple of months, for date nights. What concerts are we going to be going to see? So I can definitely see a world where record labels, kind of start pushing their own AI artists and in addition to the real ones. When you brought that up, I think there is I don't know if it's like an existentialism moment for artists, but they're now singing about the AI effect on music. There was a line on one of MGK's rap songs, and he even says like this is something AI can't recreate. There was a line in there's a whole like verse in a J. Cole song, Clouds, where he discusses like, is everything in the future gonna be AI generated? And is this what the future of music is? And then more recently, a band that I really like, Bat Flower. I'm actually planning on seeing them in August when they come to the Bay. They have a song where the guy says, "My lyrics have been accused by being written by AI," when they're not. So I think real artists are having some existential moment too of like, where does that leave me? And accusations of like whether what I do is AI generated itself.
Speaking of messy, I feel like what's happening with Anthropic and their copyright trial is just getting, I mean, the numbers are insane. Talk to me about that. What's happening there with the books basically that they've been training on?
What a judge deemed is every book that Anthropic has trained on, even if it was obviously have copyright laws, it's okay to train on and use the distilled work in their models. So everything that they trade on that was legally acquired has been deemed fine to create new models. The other part, though, was that was discovered in the trials was Anthropic has a library of 7 million books that they allegedly pirated. So those are not legally viable to train on, though it's going to go to a different trial. But the judge suggested $150,000 fine for each pirated work. So 7 million times 150,000 would equate to a little over a $1 billion fine. So even for a company like Anthropic, who's raised tens of billions, even that would still be significant, but does set precedent for at least you have to acquire data legally before using it for training. But then the second part is if not, it could be quite a significant fine on a per piece of content basis. Some of this, I'm not sure how much it stands because it'll be really hard to prove which books and how many of them, unless they're still holding on to them for whatever reason, because I'm sure a lot of their models have safeguards in place to like not spit out, regurgitate the exact same thing. I think this will be a hard case to prove, but some precedent has been sent by a judge in regards to copyrighted materials and training LLMs on them.
It's fascinating. I feel like it's again knowing what's been trained on, especially if it was years ago, right? Like, or this is they're compounding models that have like the data sets are evolving constantly. I think it's going to be very hard to untangle that, just like you said. It's funny, I'm reading this book right now talking about China in particular and their views on like AI and copyright, etc. And it's interesting to see how their more lenient views on copyright has kind of enabling them to do basically training at a scale that it would be a lot harder in the US just because of the IP that are companies could be capable of. So it'll be interesting to see, where kind of all of this ends up landing, especially from nation to nation as time goes on. But what do you think will happen here with the books piece, though? Or do you think more fines will start to come out now this precedent has been set, or more companies will go after these large AI labs? Or where do you see this heading?
I think it's going to be really difficult to prove unless it's a huge publishing company with some huge writer like Stephen King. Those have been in the past accused of being used because he's such a phenomenal writer. I'll use the Getty image example. The Getty watermark was literally spit back out in the images that the AI generators produce. So it's like, here's my watermark being used in AI generated content. So you'd have to make a really similar case over and over again that copywritten materials being spit back out by the LLM, which is really a difficult thing to prove. Like, I doubt if you chat GPT, like, hey, spit out the book It by Stephen King, I'm sure the best it'll do is provide a summary, which you can find everywhere online. And that probably wouldn't be enough. So I think it's an interesting precedent, but one that's going to be really, really hard to prove. And I'm also pretty sure that every AI company, I'm sure they don't have any pirated books on their storage, but if they did, they're being wiped clean as we speak.
Totally. I totally agree. All right. WormGPT is back. I remember reading about this. It feels like years ago now and Sage of AI. But it looks like they're using all these open source models. Talk to me what's going on with this and how is this being used for nefarious purposes?
Yeah, so WormGPT is a large language model that was used for malicious intent purposes. So things like malware scripts, phishing emails, romance scams. It actually shut down in late 2023, early 2024. But recently, new versions of it has been coming up, and it's apparently being built on Mistral, the open source LLM built by the French company Mistral, and potentially Grok. It's being sold on Telegram channels for about $110 per month or $5,400 for private versions. And yeah, it's back. I think the overarching theme is the open source models are incredible for innovation, but it's a really great example how they can be used for bad. So there's already LLMs being sold on the black market that remove all the safeguards that they have like off the shelf. And now they kind of like unhinged versions of those versions. So WormGPT is a great example of once you have an open source model, you can do whatever you want with it. Most of the time, that's usually used for good. But in the cases like this, it's like, okay, now we can fine tune it for our purposes. In the case of a fraudster and criminals, they want to do it to enhance the things that they do, which is scams. So I think that this is a really great example highlighting the negative of open source AI, but there's no stopping it because AI progress is being made a lot of times through open source. A small percentage of it will get used for these negative cases, and WormGPT and the makers or maker behind it has just realized the open source LLMs have come a really long way since the original iteration in July 2023. I should probably build the new one on top of that, and that's exactly what was done. And it's back up and running in Telegram channels.
It's crazy. It's so interesting to see the push and pull between these open source, basically like open weights models that they're releasing, and basically like the conversation that's happening at the government regulation level. Like, where should they draw the line and the boundary? Like, to your point, a lot of the open source work then goes and fuels what happens in these labs, et cetera. It's almost this playground where they identify new opportunities and then they're implemented at scale with these companies. I think that everything that we can imagine people will do with it, they're going to do with it more and more. We can try to put these safety and guardrails in place, but I think we're already past that moment in time where this could be stopped. If you think it could happen, it's probably going to happen in some capacity. So now it's going to be this cat and mouse game, just like everything evolves into.
I 100% agree with you. Like, for example, even if these models that illegal WormGPT fine tunes are built on top of were deemed like, hey, we got to get rid of them, it's probably already been downloaded a couple 100,000 times. Even if it was found out it was trained on copywritten material, like it's already out in the wild, no one's going to return to sender. So, in fact, any regulations that take place now actually only make those models that have already been released that much more valuable because it's harder to make the next ones, the ones that are already out in existence, become that much more valuable. It's almost like a rare Pokemon card or something. Like if you can't get that thing again, like it becomes more valuable. So in a lot of ways, it's too late. These things are already out there, and no matter what the regulation does, the cat's already out of the hat.
Totally. I totally agree. I don't know how people are going to stop it at this point. So but anyway, to transition on, RFK Jr. is doing this Make America Healthy Again report. Talk to me about that. What's going on?
Yeah, RFK created this report called Make America Healthy Again. And a lot of reporters did research on it. A lot of the citations were actually wrong. 37 of the 522 were multiple citations. A lot of the links were broken. And in fact, some of the URLs for the references included OAI site, which is a marker that actually OpenAI uses and a lot of their references when they get returned back. So I think it's incredible that the government is potentially using AI for the writing, but also kind of terrifying that they didn't proofread the citations being made from AI. In my personal experience, a lot of the URLs are wrong in a lot of the chats, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, etc. Like for whatever reason, it does definitely make things up or in AI speak hallucinate. I think it's because the AI really wants to make the user happy with its response. So whether it's real or not, it's really trying to satisfy what the user is asking for. And in the case of this healthcare report, I'm sure there were certain themes RFK and his team were really trying to push, and certain points and facts that they're really trying to push. And if AI was indeed being used, I'm sure that AI was really trying hard to appease those requests and stay on theme and stay on brand for what was trying to be accomplished. And the result was almost 10% of the citations were either multiple wrong or had some kind of flag within the URL.
That's insane. It's so funny to me with all this, like all these AI chat and how they're sourcing from open web, basically. Right? We write content for companies that shows up on front pages of Google. The information on that, it's like all they're sourcing it from is page 1 through 3. Whatever shows up on page 1 through 3, that's basically what it's scraping and then aggregating and returning a response on. So if the source information on page 1 through 3 is incorrect, then that means it's going to quote that information is going to be incorrect, right? So I don't think the majority of individuals understand how all this is functioning. I mean, it's so new, it makes sense. They just look at it and they're like, oh, yeah, it's like spitting out these answers. It's providing sources, obviously, but the underlying sources that it's pulling from can still be gamed is really what I'm trying to say. Fascinating to see. I think there is going to need to be like an education component to this to actually get people to understand what's occurring under the hood. How does this compare to these tools that are built for academia that basically source from journals rather than the open web? It kind of uses a walled garden of information. Do you feel like that's a good answer for this, like creating these walled gardens that it basically lives in, or what's the best implementation of this in your expertise?
I think they are good implementations. I think AI, for the most part, is going to produce actually really good results. I think when you're asking it for 522 citations, like the Make America Healthy Again report did, I think naturally some of them are going to be wrong or have some kind of errors. But in general, I think it is good. It's just a good reminder that you still need a human in the loop. You still have to click through every one of those URLs, and you can't take it at face value, as I'm sure whatever tools that they're using are really powerful. I would hope up to the best, since it is the government and they're producing a report for the public about healthcare out of all things. But if you're blindly trusting AI on 522 citations, there will be errors. It's still pretty good, but for something as high stakes as a healthcare report or a legal thing, you need a human in the loop and you have to double check. There's definitely still going to be errors.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I think that that's becoming more and more of it's like have the, this tooling do the work, get it 90% of the way there, bring that human in the loop, and that human in the loop's responsibility is basically turning into a curator or, a fact checker, et cetera, or just even a taste maker is how we're kind of describing it more and more internally. Your job is to know what's good and let it do all the heavy lifting and then pick the best based on that.
For sure.
Anyway,
For sure.
any final thoughts?
I do think there's a lot of room for healthcare and AI, both good and bad. I think it can make doctors productive, help people on a one-to-one basis with their health. So I do hope this gets right. But at the same time, I'm really tired of seeing over 40 ads about hair loss and belly fat. Only one of those things is applicable to me. Thankfully, knock on wood, there's probably some regulations around that that need to be made. But I think this is quite comical, but also a good example of like you still need a human in the loop if you're using AI.
I totally agree. So awesome, man. That is great. We'll turn this into next week's email newsletters. Thanks again, man.
All right.